It started with a screech of tires and shattered glass. A single moment that changed everything. My wife, Jenna, and I were in a horrifying car accident on a dark Texas highway. As the paramedics pulled us from the wreckage, I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. The truth came crashing down harder than the collision when I found a mysterious text on her unlocked phone at the hospital. It revealed not only her betrayal but a secret that would unravel my life. Little did I know the accident wasn't the end of the disaster. It was just the beginning. The headlights came out of nowhere. One moment, the highway stretched ahead, empty and silent except for the hum of tires against asphalt. The next, there was the blinding glare of oncoming lights, the screech of tires, and the violent crunch of metal against metal. My body jolted forward, the seatbelt biting into my chest. Jenna screamed, her voice cutting through the chaos, and then everything went black. When I came to, the world around me was a blur of flashing red and blue lights. My head throbbed, my chest ached, and the air smelled of gasoline and burnt rubber. Paramedics swarmed the wreckage, their voices muffled as if they were speaking underwater. "Sir, can you hear me?" A man's face appeared above mine, his expression both calm and urgent. I tried to respond, but my throat felt dry and raw. I nodded weakly. "You've been in an accident," he continued. "Don't move. We're getting you out." "Jenna?" I croaked, my voice barely audible. "Where's my wife?" "She's being looked at," the paramedic assured me. "She's stable." Relief washed over me, but it was fleeting. My thoughts were muddled, fragments of the crash replaying in my mind. The car, the lights, the impact, something about it felt wrong. It wasn't just the shock or the pain. It was a gnawing sensation in my gut, an instinct I couldn't shake. At the hospital, the chaos continued. Doctors and nurses moved with practiced efficiency, stitching wounds and setting bones. They told me I had a concussion and a couple of fractured ribs. Jenna, they said, had been luckier, just a few cuts and bruises. I was wheeled into a recovery room while they finished examining her. The quiet should have been comforting, but instead, it gave my mind space to wander. I couldn't stop replaying the accident, trying to piece together what had happened. Then I saw her phone. It was sitting on a tray near her purse, the screen cracked but still glowing faintly. I wouldn't have looked at it. Shouldn't have, but a notification lit up the screen, catching my eye. "Are you okay? Please tell me you're safe. I can't stop thinking about you." The message was from someone named Chris. My stomach sank. I stared at the screen, willing it to make sense. Chris. Who the hell was Chris? My hand trembled as I reached for the phone. Jenna and I had been married for 8 years. We didn't have secrets, or at least I thought we didn't. The phone buzzed again, another message appearing. "I'm worried about you. Did he find out?" My heart pounded in my chest, harder than it had when the car hit us. The room seemed to tilt around me as I unlocked the phone. A code I'd known for years, and opened the message thread. The texts were a gut punch. They went back months, full of inside jokes, late-night confessions, and plans to meet. "Last night was amazing. I wish we didn't have to hide. I can't wait to see you again. Counting the days. Do you ever think about leaving him? We could be happy, Jenna." I dropped the phone as if it had burned me. The betrayal was suffocating, the walls of the hospital room closing in. This couldn't be real. Jenna, my Jenna, was having an affair. The door opened, and there she was. She looked pale and tired, her hair disheveled, a bandage on her forehead. But to me, she looked like a stranger. "Hey," she said softly, her voice cracking. "They told me you're okay." I couldn't speak. My mouth felt dry, the words trapped in my throat. She stepped closer, her brow furrowing as she took in my expression. "Mark? What's wrong?" I wanted to yell, to demand answers, but the pain in my chest made it hard to breathe. I shook my head, my gaze darting to the phone still sitting on the tray. Her eyes followed mine, and I saw the moment she realized. Her face went white. "Mark," she started, but I cut her off. "Don't," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "Not here. Not now." Her lips parted as if to argue, But then she nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She sat in the chair beside my bed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The silence between us was deafening. The drive home the next day was unbearable. Jenna insisted on driving, citing my injuries, but I couldn't bear to sit beside her. The air in the car was thick with unspoken words, the tension palpable. I stared out the window, watching the landscape blur past, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. When we finally pulled into the driveway, I couldn't hold it in any longer. The door hadn't even fully closed behind us before I turned to her. "Who is Chris?" I demanded, my voice trembling with anger. She froze, her face a mask of guilt and panic. "Mark, Don't lie to me, Jenna," I shouted, the pain in my ribs flaring with the force of my voice. "I saw the messages. I know." Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't care. "How long?" I asked, my voice breaking. "How long has this been going on?" She looked down, her hands trembling. "A year," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe a little longer." The room spun. A year. For more than a year, she'd been lying to me, sharing her life with someone else while I thought we were happy. "Why?" I asked, my voice raw. "Why would you do this?" She didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her words were like another blow. "Because I felt trapped. I love you, Mark. I do. But somewhere along the way I lost myself. And then Chris. He made me feel seen." I staggered back, the weight of her confession too much to bear. "Seen," I repeated, my voice hollow. "I've given you everything, Jenna. Our life, our son, our marriage. And that wasn't enough." Her eyes widened, and a fresh wave of tears spilled down her cheeks. "Mark, there's something else," she said, her voice trembling. "Something I need to tell you." I braced myself, knowing whatever came next would shatter me completely. "It's about Ethan," she said, her voice cracking. He's not yours." For a moment, I couldn't process her words. It was as if she'd spoken in another language. Then the meaning sank in, and the floor seemed to drop out from under me. "Ethan, my son, my boy, wasn't mine." I stared at her, my chest heaving, my vision blurred by tears. "Get out," I said, my voice deadly calm. "Get out of this house. Mark, please. Get out." I roared, the pain in my chest forgotten in the storm of rage and betrayal. She flinched, then turned and fled down the hallway, her sobs echoing in the empty house. I sank onto the couch, my head in my hands, as the weight of everything came crashing down. My marriage was a lie. My family was a lie, and I had no idea how to pick up the pieces. The hours after Jenna left felt like a void. I sat on the couch, staring blankly at the darkened TV screen, my thoughts swirling in an unrelenting storm. Ethan's laughter echoed in my memory, his tiny hand clutching mine as we walked to the park, his joy when I helped him build a Lego tower, the way he'd say "Good night, Dad," with complete trust. The words played in my head now like a cruel joke. Was it all fake? Was my love for him misplaced because of her lies? A sharp knock at the door jolted me back to the present. For a moment, I thought it might be Jenna, but when I opened it, my heart sank even further. It was Chris. He stood there awkwardly, his hands stuffed into his jacket pockets, his expression torn between guilt and defiance. He wasn't what I had imagined. Not some suave, charismatic charmer. He was average. Short-cropped hair, tired eyes, and a posture that screamed discomfort. "Mark," he started, his voice low. "I know I shouldn't have come, but I couldn't leave things like this." I didn't invite him in. I just stood there, gripping the doorframe, my ribs aching from the tension. "What the hell do you want?" I said, my voice rough. "To explain," he said, his gaze darting to the floor. "To make you understand." "Understand?" I scoffed, the words bitter on my tongue. "You've been sleeping with my wife. You've ruined my family. What part of that do you think I'll understand?" His jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he might walk away. I almost hoped he would. But instead, he looked up at me, his eyes filled with something I didn't expect. Regret. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, he said. It started as, I don't know, a connection, I guess. She was unhappy. He stopped himself, running a hand through his hair. It doesn't matter. I didn't come here to make excuses. I came because I thought you should know the truth. You think I don't already know enough? I snapped, my hands curling into fists. Ethan's not your biological son, he said bluntly, and the words hit me harder than I expected. But that doesn't mean he's not your son. Get out, I said, my voice shaking. You don't get to talk about him. I'm not trying to replace you, Chris said quickly. I swear, Jenna never wanted that. She told me she wanted you to stay his father, no matter what. His words should have felt like some twisted consolation, but instead, they only made me angrier. And yet, here you are, I said coldly. You couldn't even let me figure this out on my own. He flinched but didn't back down. I didn't want you to hear it all from her. I wanted to take responsibility for my part in this. I love Ethan too, but I know he needs you. The audacity of his words made my blood boil. You love him? You've barely been in his life and you think you love him? You don't know the first thing about what it means to be his father. Chris opened his mouth to respond but thought better of it. He nodded slowly, stepping back. You're right, he said quietly. I don't, and I probably never will. But I didn't want to hide anymore. I thought you deserved to know everything. Get off my porch, I said through gritted teeth, and stay away from my family. He hesitated, as if he wanted to say more, but he finally turned and walked back to his car. I watched him go, my chest heaving with rage and something deeper, something I didn't want to name. When he was gone, I slammed the door and leaned against it, feeling more lost than ever. The days that followed were a blur. Jenna stayed away, giving me space, but the silence in the house was deafening. Ethan was staying with my mother for the weekend, blissfully unaware of the storm raging around him. I didn't know how I was going to face him. What could I possibly say? One night, as I was nursing a drink at the kitchen counter, my phone buzzed. It was Jenna. We need to talk. Not about us, about Ethan. Please. I stared at the message, my mind warring with itself. I didn't want to see her, to hear more of her lies. But if it was about Ethan, I had no choice. I texted back. Tomorrow, noon. Here. She showed up right on time, looking as fragile as I'd ever seen her. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. She stepped inside hesitantly, as if the house might reject her. I didn't think you'd let me come back, she said quietly. This isn't about you, I said, crossing my arms. What do you want to tell me? She nodded, her hands twisting nervously in front of her. I've been thinking about the accident, she said. About what caused it. My brow furrowed. What are you talking about? I've been getting these messages, she said, pulling out her phone. At first, I thought they were just random, but after the crash, they started to feel more personal. She handed me the phone, and I scrolled through the texts. They were from an unknown number, and the messages were chilling. You think you can just run away? I know what you're hiding. Everyone will know soon enough. You'll pay for what you've done. The most recent one, sent the night of the accident, made my blood run cold. See you on the road. I looked up at her, my heart pounding. What the hell is this? I don't know, she said, her voice trembling. I thought it was Chris at first, but I asked him and he swore it wasn't him. Mark, I think someone was trying to hurt me. My mind raced. The accident, the headlights, the way the car had swerved into our lane. It hadn't felt like an accident then, and now I was sure. Do you have any idea who it could be? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Jenna hesitated, biting her lip. There's one person, she admitted. Someone from Chris's past. He told me about her once. A woman he used to be involved with. Her name's Vanessa. The name meant nothing to me, but the implication was clear. Whoever Vanessa was, she wasn't finished with Jenna, or with us. The room felt colder after Jenna mentioned Vanessa's name, as if the air itself had grown heavier. I stared at her, waiting for her to elaborate, but she just stood there, wringing her hands, her eyes darting anywhere but at me. Who is she? I finally asked, my voice low and tight. And what does she want with you? She's Chris's ex, Jenna said, hesitating over every word. He told me about her months ago. They were together for years, but it ended badly. He said she was unstable. Unstable? I echoed, my anger bubbling just below the surface. Unstable enough to try to kill us? Jenna flinched but nodded. I think so. I didn't want to believe it at first, but the texts, the way the car came at us, it doesn't feel like a coincidence. I turned away, running a hand through my hair, trying to process everything. This was more than just her betrayal. It was a threat to our lives, to Ethan's life. And it all started with her affair. Why didn't you tell me about this sooner? I demanded, spinning back toward her. You've been getting these texts for how long? And you just decided now was the time to mention them? I didn't know what to do, she said, her voice cracking. I thought I could handle it, that it would stop. I didn't think she'd go this far. And now someone's trying to kill you, I said coldly. Do you realize how much danger you've put Ethan in? How much danger you've put me in? Tears spilled down her cheeks, but I didn't care. She wasn't the victim here. Not anymore. I'm going to the police, I said, grabbing my jacket. And you're going to tell them everything. Every text, every call, everything Chris told you about her. Jenna hesitated. Do you think they'll do anything? Without proof. I don't care what they do, I snapped. But I'm not going to sit around and wait for her to come after us again. Jenna nodded silently and followed me out to the car. At the station, the detective we spoke to was polite but skeptical. He listened as Jenna recounted the texts and Chris's history with Vanessa, but his expression didn't change much. We'll look into it, he said, jotting down notes. Do you have the messages on your phone? Jenna handed it over, and the detective promised to trace the number. But without direct threats or any concrete evidence linking her to the crash, it's going to be tough to pursue. So we just wait for her to try again? I asked, my voice tight with frustration. We'll do what we can, he said, though his tone didn't inspire much confidence. As we left the station, my phone buzzed. It was my mom. Ethan's name flashed in my mind, and I answered quickly. Mom, is everything okay? Ethan's fine, she said, but her voice was tense. But there's someone outside the house. A woman. She's just sitting in her car, watching. My blood turned to ice. What does she look like? I don't know. I can't see her very well. But she's been out there for over an hour. We're on our way, I said, hanging up before she could respond. I turned to Jenna. We have to go. Now. We drove in silence, the tension in the car so thick it felt like a living thing. My mind raced as I gripped the wheel, my knuckles white. If it was Vanessa outside my mother's house, she'd made this personal. She wasn't just after Jenna. She was after Ethan. When we arrived, I saw the car immediately. A dark sedan parked across the street. The windows were tinted, but I could feel the eyes watching us as we pulled up. I parked the car and stepped out, my heart pounding. Stay here, I told Jenna. Mark, wait. I said stay here. I approached the car cautiously, every nerve in my body on edge. As I got closer, the driver's side window rolled down slowly, and I saw her. Vanessa was younger than I expected, mid-30s maybe, with sharp features and a calm, unsettling expression. She didn't look like someone who'd been sending unhinged texts or ramming cars off the road. But her eyes, there was something cold in them, something dangerous. Can I help you? I asked, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. She smiled faintly. You're Mark, aren't you? Who's asking? I'm Vanessa, she said, her tone almost casual. I'm guessing Jenna's told you about me. She has, I said. So why don't you tell me what you're doing here? Her smile widened, but it didn't reach her eyes. I just wanted to see what all the fuss was about. Jenna and Chris seem to think you're something special. I clenched my fists at my sides. If you have a problem with Jenna, take it up with her. Leave my family out of it. Your family? she repeated, her tone mocking. Funny how you say that when Ethan isn't even yours. The words hit me harder than I expected, but I didn't let it show. He's my son, and if you come near him again, I'll make sure you regret it. Her expression flickered for a moment, something darker creeping into her gaze. You think you can protect them? You have no idea what Jenna's capable of. What the hell is that supposed to mean? She didn't answer. Instead, she rolled up her window and started the car. I stepped back as she pulled away, her tires kicking up gravel. I stood there for a long moment, the sound of her car fading into the distance. When I finally turned back to the house, Jenna was standing in the doorway, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. She's not going to stop, I said as I approached. Not unless we stop her first. How? Jenna asked, her voice trembling. What are we supposed to do? I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. That night, I sat in Ethan's room as he slept, watching his tiny chest rise and fall with each breath. I'd promised to protect him, and I would, no matter what it took. Even if it meant walking away from the wreckage of my marriage. Even if it meant confronting a woman like Vanessa on her own terms. Because Ethan was my son. And nothing, not Jenna's lies, not Chris's betrayal, not Vanessa's threats, would ever change that.